going to introduce our guest speaker today. His name is David Henry, and he is from Northside. Interestingly enough, that is where Di and Jessica are right now, because Jessica is going to be officially here October 1st, so they are prayerfully sending her down our direction. And they also loaned us another person today. He's an ordained elder and has served at Northside in many different ways. He currently serves as security at Newburgh Hospital. He also enjoys writing novels, good sci-fi, and spending time with his family. So now that we know a little bit about him, come on up and we'll pray for you. God, I thank you for David this morning, and I pray that he would share what you have for him to share with us. I pray that you would allow him to speak your words this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
I have to make one correction on my bio. I also like bad sci-fi. I almost think there's no bad sci-fi. So I heard today was Mission Sunday. I love missions. So I'm going to give you a little background on my missions experience. It all started, I figured it was around 2003. I got a chance to go to Ecuador. It's like, okay. And I learned a lot about missions just on that one trip. Because I'm going there, we spent a lot of money. This is like our first big missions trip we did as a church, I think, to go help build the church. And we're there, we're helping, I'm doing masonry work. Sorry, I've never done that before. And I had to ask the pastor down there, wouldn't it be easier if I just sent you money? You could spend it a lot more, because we probably a couple $1,000s per person just to go down there. And there was, I think, 8 of us that went down there. I said, wouldn't it be easier and more beneficial to just send money? And he said, no. Just knowing somebody out there cares enough to come and help is worth more than the money. And as a side note on that mission trip, you never know how your words are going to impact anybody down there. The missionary that was in charge of this, we had to go get some tools and stuff, and we're driving, and you go to South America, the driving is a little bit chaotic. And he was getting a little frustrated, so I shared with him something that I had learned, and I don't always do myself, but I had gotten frustrated with stopping at stoplights, and I happened to time a light one time. I'm sitting there, 20 seconds. That's how long it took from turning red to turning green. And that kind of changed my outlook on this. And I didn't think anything of it. I told him about this. But when he came back to the States years later, he said that changed his attitude towards driving. It's like, I didn't intend for that to be the case, but it was. It changed things. My next missions opportunity, and I had 5 of them, was going to Guatemala with your pastor, Di. She was heading up that. And go back a little bit first to Ecuador. Something that I learned is that, Guatemala, what I learned is that you have to be willing to receive. At that time, this was a couple of years later, we didn't have a lot of money. And one of the trips, it looked like we probably weren't going to be able to raise the money to go. We needed about $1,000 more to be able to go. And I shared with a friend of mine at work. We've become very good friends. And I wasn't looking for anything. I told him how much. And he reached in his pocket and pulled out $1,000 and said, here. I tried not to cry, because it changed our lives. Because I got to go home and my wife's, I think, doing something, and I lay out the money on the bed, and her eyes got big. But I had to be willing to receive that in order to change my attitude towards this. And the next opportunity I had was Ensenada, Mexico. I got to go with a group of high school students and go to a orphanage down there. And at this opportunity, I'd been on a mission trip multiple times. I got to share my addiction to missions with the youth and hopefully get them to want to carry that on. So that's a little bit about my background in mission, and I don't expect very many people to have those opportunities or take those opportunities. But what I want to talk about today is feeding the 5,000. How many have heard of feeding the 5,000? Right? Well, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the little boy. Think about what it was like for him. So this is found in John 6, 1 through 14. It's also found in Matthew 14, the same story. So I'll read this. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on the mountain, sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy food for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" So I'm going to stop there. Now, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of this boy. I'm there watching Jesus, got all these people. I got my meal here, probably more than one meal, 5 loaves of bread. That seems like a little bit, maybe for the next couple of days. And here is Andrew saying, "Hey, here's somebody with food." And I'm thinking Andrew might be a little facetious in his asking this. Because I imagine you got 5,000 people. This little boy, I don't think, is the only one that had food there. I'm sure there's other people that had some food. But he's pointing out this little boy. I think Andrew may have been testing Jesus to see what he could do. But Jesus already knew what he was going to do. So I think the boy might have been thinking, my food isn't going to go very far. I don't know about this. Andrew, did you have to say something? That's my food. So, Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in the place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed it to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to the disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." They gathered them, filled 12 baskets with pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who came to us and came into the world." So can you relate to the little boy at all? Not having very much, thinking maybe what I have isn't enough, isn't worth giving up. So there are 5 things that I think we can learn from this boy. That God is in control. Jesus knew exactly what he was going to do before he even asked about feeding all these people. He knew that this boy was here, but you also have to know that Jesus didn't need this boy. God does not need our resources. If I don't give this $5 to this charity or whatever that God is supporting, he will find a way without me. So it's not something that I have to do. He's not going to throw up his arms. Well, David didn't give. I guess I'm done for the day. You know, he doesn't need our money. But God is in control. He has a plan. And I always think God has a backup plan and a backup plan and a backup plan. If something I do or a choice that I make does not go with God's plan, there's another plan in place. So the boy learned that day that God is in control. And God is about multiplication. You know, he can take the smallest things that we have and multiply them. And I also noted from the story that, you know, they were asking about bread. Well, God didn't just give bread. He gave bread and fish. You know, they were only talking about getting the bread. He can multiply it. He can take, you know, an elderly, childless couple and create a great nation. He can take what the widow gave, you know, gave 2 cents. That's all she had. But he can multiply it. You know, he took a small group of people in an upper room and created a world, a global movement. And multiplication, if God is multiplying something and he's using us, it takes trust in our part. The boy had to trust that God, that Jesus, he's standing there, well, here's my food. You know, I might go hungry now, but I have to trust that God is in control. He will take what I have, even though it might be all I have, and he can multiply it. We have to trust that he will do this. Now, he will use our resources for his purpose. And we have to trust that God is going to use it in the best way. And sometimes that trust goes to, I need to trust the people that I'm giving the money, that God is going to use it through them. And multiplication often takes sacrifice. Like I said, the boy, he must have been hungry. You know, it's lunchtime, but he's going to trust. You know, Jesus said, give me this money. I'm thinking, you know, Jesus is an elder. So in that day and age, if an elder says, give me your food, you're going to give it to him. There's not going to be any question, but it's going to be a sacrifice. He might go hungry if Jesus doesn't do what he said he's going to do. You know, Abel had to trust God with his first fruit. You know, and then Jesus pointed out the widow, like I said, that took sacrifice. That's all she had. I mean, I don't know if I've ever sacrificed and gave everything, my last penny. I don't know if I can do that. Hopefully, if God asks it, I can do it. And multiplication, number 5. We're going through this quick. Multiplication is a result of God's work, not ours. We get to participate, but it wasn't the little boy that did the multiplication. It wasn't the disciples that did the multiplication. It was Jesus that multiplied. You know, he took those men up in the upper room and multiplied and multiplied. But it wasn't their work. It was through the work of the Holy Spirit in them that created this great religion, great movement. You know, it's not our possessions. So the boy with 2 fishes and loaves learned a lot that day. He learned God is in control. He is about multiplication. He learned that multiplication takes trust and sacrifice. And he learned that it wasn't our actions that did anything. All it took was Jesus to multiply. So if you don't think you have anything to relate to this little boy, because you have a lot, well, think about giving all that you had and how that would affect your life. So I tell you that story to get you another story. You know, when we when I think about missions, I don't think about the big grand thing anymore. I love going on missions. I haven't been on years. But I think a mission should be an everyday lifestyle. In Matthew 25, 31 through 40, when the Son of Man comes into his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goat. He will put the sheep on the right side and the goat on the left. When the king says to those on the right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came and visited me." Then the righteous will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did to one of the least of these, brothers and sisters of mine, you did to me." And one word in that stood out to me. It said, "When did I see?" I have to see with God's eyes. I have to be aware. I pray every day that I will I will have the eyes of God so I can look for opportunities to do missions. And that missions may be giving somebody, $5 for lunch. Now, the greatest example to me of everyday mission is my father. He grew up in the church, but he was an example of, if something needed to be done, he would be the one to step up. And he'd drag me along. I didn't appreciate it at the time. If somebody needed some wood, we'd go cut some wood and take them wood. If somebody needed yard work, we'd go do yard work. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, but my dad would work. He still does that today. They live in a 55 and older trailer park, and he's always going around helping the widows or whatever do yard work or fix something. But that was what got me started to be a servant. I think my spiritual gift of service is because of him. So my motto in my everyday service is do what you can with what you have where you're at. When I was doing the short-term missions, we didn't have much money. Now we're in a position where we can help others. And not there. And so my missions have changed since I was doing all those missions. So my current missions are, I help with the maintenance of the church. I'm part of men's ministry. I try to be an example at work. And one thing I do, I have a Bible study on Tuesday mornings. I buy donuts. And one thing I had to learn about, it's not that much to buy a dozen donuts for Bible study. But people feel the need to give me money. I don't ask for it. But occasionally somebody will give me money, and I have to be willing to receive that. Because for them, that's a blessing. They want to bless me. Okay, I don't need your money, but I have to learn to receive that blessing. And another missions field is my grandchildren. My son and daughter-in-law aren't doing what is required of them. So we take care of their spiritual needs. We bring them to church almost every Sunday. Oops, forgot about that. So the key word I want you to focus on in your daily missions activity is the word see. Pray that you will see with God's eyes those needs that need to be met. You know, it's not always financial. Sometimes it's just going and mowing the lawn. Maybe it's just going and sitting with somebody that needs companionship. You know, Karen, she volunteers at Loving, which is our non-food pantry. You know, you don't have to always do big, grandiose things, but just those little acts of service can change people's lives. So where is your mission field? Is it home? Is it someday going to Guatemala, Africa, you know, China, whatever? But you need to ask God, where can I see your work and help? What can I do for you? So I'll leave you with this. Do what you can with what you have, with what God gave you, where you're at. And just see what God can do. See what He will multiply in your life.
The word see really jumped out at me. I think we've told this story here before. There was a young lady when Christian was, my youngest was in middle school, and there was a young lady who didn't feel like anybody ever saw her. And one day she woke up and she decided, if nobody notices me today, I'm going to come home and commit suicide. And Christian was passing her in the hallway and he smiled and said hi. And she decided, somebody saw me. I'm not going to commit suicide today. So the